And a record for folks that can't be here live.
Got it. I'm ready to go.
Great, thank you. So, hi everyone. Um, Welcome, and really glad that you're here. This feels like a unique meetup. We had scheduled this 2 weeks ago, and it was the start of what was happening around coronavirus, and so we thought we'll do some self-regulation practices, and then just a lot has changed in the last couple weeks. And I said this to those of you that uh, were on 5 minutes ago, but in case you're just coming on, my internet just went down. The Wi-Fi just suddenly crashed, and I had heard that there's some strains right now on home internet stuff. So I'm hoping that that was just a one-off. But if I leave, it's probably my internet. You're welcome to hang here, and I will come back because I'll get back on my phone. But fingers crossed that this just holds up. And when I was on my phone, I had logged in, and then I tried to leave the meeting, and it said end meeting, and I ended the meeting for all. So I promise I won't do that again. So I'm coming to you from Berkeley, California. We are, as you may have heard, we are in currently a mandatory stay in place measure right now in the county. There's 4 or 5 counties right now. And then I was just looking through the chat box to see where people are coming in from. And I know there's people here from all over the world. So welcome, especially those of you that haven't been to a meetup call before with us. We've been doing these calls for almost the past year. And I totally encourage you, the chat box will be open for this entire call for this hour. I'll talk in a moment about how we'll structure it. But this is a chance for us to connect, come together as a community. So please let folks know where you're here from. I also mentioned this, but Tyler, who's friend and colleague, will be here helping. So he might chime in on the chat box. For those that haven't been to these meetup calls before, we hold these once a month, and they hold a couple different purposes, but the primary one is for us to really get the practice together. It's really a chance to come together in community, and there's just so much wisdom in this community of people. There's so many of you that are working in multiple different environments, and there'll be other people here that are practitioners, you're interested in the topic. But really, this community has been serving those of you who are what I'm calling mindfulness providers and supporting all of us to offer mindfulness practices in a trauma sensitive way. So typically what we're doing is we're digging into a particular issue around trauma sensitive practice. We do some practice together, and then we do some Q&A. And today, it'll be a little bit different today. And what I'd like to focus on today is primarily self-regulation practices. And as much as possible, given the moment, I want this to be as resourcing as a time for us as possible. So I'm going to be doing a couple different things, but one is to really just offer you these practices. There'll be a lot of practice in this session. And then I'll be also offering us a chance to connect here with each other. There might be some of you that want to have people that you want to be sitting with online. Zoom supposedly had a big day a couple of days ago where all these subscriptions came through. So Zoom, it seems to be a popular place right now. So you'll have the chance to actually connect with each other if that's something that you're interested in. And this, as I said, this work has been a lot for providers, but of course we're all doing our own work here as well. So this is a chance for us to be also in our self-regulation practices, and so just the fact that you're here to me speaks to the importance of like all of us getting to work together. I imagine that many of you are also in spaces where you're being looked to around your expertise around mindfulness. So the more that we can kind of fill up our own tanks, the better. And honestly, I just want to do well by the community in this moment, and was preparing for this last night, and just want to do well by this, what's here right now. This is such a unique moment, and want to really be of service. And I feel like Part of that will be offering what I've been doing around trauma sensitive practice and mindfulness, and then also to just be a forum for you to get to connect with each other. So those are the two pieces that I'm really looking forward to doing here in this call. So how this is going to roll on the call here is I'll start with an opening practice for us here, a chance to just get present, drop in. And then I'm going to be talking through self-regulation and trauma-sensitive practice. And then I'm going to lead you through 3 different practices that I found quite useful. I'm trying to mix it up. Like one will be on the breath, but I'm trying to offer you practices that maybe you might not have done. There's so many resources that are out there right now. And then at the end of that, we'll come back for a chance to just do some sharing. Here might be some questions about the self-regulation practices. It might be some sharing, like you might have some stories that you want to share. And then at the end of the call, what I'll be doing is offering optional breakout rooms. So for those of you on Zoom that have done this, you'll have the chance to be in rooms with, say, 4 or 6 people, and you'll just have a chance to share, how are you doing, what practices are working for you, and a chance to connect. And I'm also going to leave space for us to be self-organizing together. You're welcome to do it during the call on the chat. If you want to be typing in, hey, I'm looking for someone to be sitting with, or I'm working in this particular domain, anyone there? So please self-organize, totally encourage that. And I'll also leave some time at the end for us to purposely do that. So let's practice together. Let's start with a short practice. Glad my internet still seems to be working. And first part of this practice is just inviting you to find a posture that works best for you right now. That might be sitting, or if you have the means to be lying down, you're welcome to stand if that would be supportive. But just taking a moment, checking in with what posture will best support you. And then you're welcome to have your eyes open or closed. And I'm just going to invite you to take a couple of deeper belly breaths here. If the breath feels too activating, you're welcome to just let that one go. Otherwise, just a couple deeper breaths to support presence, regulation of the breath and the respiratory system, and by virtue of the body and support of the mind. And some of you know this practice, but part of trauma sensitive work also is to let ourselves just take a moment to orient to our surrounding environment. So after those breaths, and that could be with your eyes open or closed, it could be through sound, but just letting yourself orient to the present moment through your senses. And this is a way to let the nervous system really calibrate with the current time and space. So intense stress and adversity, will often be pulling us into different moments, with trauma often into the past. And this moment is a chance to just be as clear as possible as to what's happening when it's happening. So that might be noticing the surrounding environment that you're in. There might be some familiarity or not. Some of you might have seen this practice of naming a couple things that are around you. That could be sound. Like for me, I hear a heater that's on, or I hear a plane in the distance. Or it could also just be naming through sight, like, okay, I see a lamp to my right. Again, these are ways to help the body become fully present in the moment. And you could also just notice the context of where you are right now. So we are approximately 10 minutes in to this call on trauma sensitive mindfulness and resourcing. you making this space this morning for practice, just really letting yourself note the current time and space, where you are, what you're up to. And then for the next minute or so, I'm going to invite you to be anchoring your attention on something that you find resourcing right now. And by resourcing, I mean something that has you feel a sense of choice, of agency. It may be something as simple as just it feels good to be focusing on that. Or it could even just be neutral, especially if you're in a more activated place. So instead of immediately focusing on the breath here, I invite you to choose something. It could be inside, like in your inner experience, but it could also be outside of you that you find resourcing. So that could be something like a sensation, like the feeling of the buttocks in a chair or your feet on the ground. Or it might be your hands gently pressed together. And there are other times where a focus internally might actually be too activating, or it might not feel as resourcing as we'd like. So the invitation as well is to focus on something outside of yourself. That could be if you have a view of a window, something happening outside, or it could be something in your surrounding environment, a four-legged friend, or a picture, or just something as simple as like a door frame. But it doesn't always have to be an internal focus. It can also be external. And just letting your attention again rest with something that you find resourcing, or at least neutral. If that's not possible, don't worry. Otherwise, just letting your attention hang here for a moment, purposely being with what is resourceful, not as a way to skip over what's difficult, but just as a way to give your nervous system a chance to ground and be supported with your attention with a place of resource. And if you notice that your mind wanders off into thought, the invitation is just to bring your attention gently back to this anchor point. Of course, you're welcome to mix it up at any point. And then in the next minute, I'm going to be shifting from this practice, but just know that this is a point of attention you're welcome to come back to at any point on this call. It could also be any point during the day. But just cultivating our resources during times of stress. And then in the next few breaths, I'm going to invite you to shift here. So in any way that feels good to you, that could be a little bit of movement, that could involve going back to the breath, a couple more deeper breaths. It might be placing your hand on the heart and the belly just as a way to close. But anything that will support you here to be shifting out of this opening practice. We'll be coming back to self-regulation, but we'll be closing this practice for now. Okay. Thanks, everyone. So I'm going to spend the next probably like 8 minutes talking about self-regulation, and particularly how this is, how we could frame this inside of trauma-sensitive practice. And also then I'll offer you 3 different practices, and we'll get to practice together. Um, by self-regulation, I know there's going to be so many people here in this group and community who are, a lot of you are clinicians, you're working one-to-one with people, your meditation teachers, you'll have your own practice. So you're working with self-regulation, both with yourselves, with others all the time. And by self-regulation, in this moment, I'm meaning our ability to really deeply to tend to ourselves in a moment when we're feeling dysregulated. By dysregulated, I mean when we're feeling uh, very stressed, out of what I'll call our window, where we're feeling triggered. It's difficult to um, string together thoughts. We might feel incredibly anxious, disrupted, like it's difficult to be present and to feel in choice. We'll all have our own versions of dysregulation. For those of you that have been in the community, we've had actually calls where we're talking about like, how do I know when I'm regulated? When I know when I'm dysregulated? So you all have your own experiences and signs that tell you when you're at the edges of your window, when you're approaching the edges of regulation and moving towards dysregulation. I want to be very clear up front that by regulation, I don't mean calm, that we can be anxious and we can still be regulated. We could be grieving or we could be excited and still be regulated to some degree. It doesn't mean that when we're regulated, we're just very neutral. But there is this kind of dividing line of a place where, okay, wow, I'm really now out of my window or zone. And for those of us that are in this practice around mindfulness, of having the ability to know in the moment that, wow, okay, now I'm out of my window, I'm dysregulated. What could I actually do in this moment to support my regulation? And that might be for you personally, or it could also be for those of us, in families and partnerships and communities. We're in some tight quarters right now. I've been hanging out with a lot of my neighbors right now who have multiple kids, and they have their mindfulness practices and they're working. They're like, wow, my regulation is definitely helping to also regulate my kids or regulate the family. So mindfulness is so useful at noticing, okay, wow, okay, here's a moment that I'm dysregulated. For those of you that are newer to my work around mindfulness and trauma, the basic headline is that mindfulness alone won't necessarily heal trauma. And trauma survivors often need mindfulness as a tool to work with regulation and dysregulation, but that mindfulness alone, just bare mindful attention, won't always work when it comes to working with traumatic stress and adversity. Sometimes it can make things worse. I won't have the chance to totally unpack the research and thinking around that in particular. But the headline here is that in times of adversity, like right now, based on my own qualitative research and just now about 10 years in this path and practice, that attending to elements of high degrees of stress, now I've been looking at trauma, basically over attending, paying too much attention to what is dysregulating for us can sometimes make things worse. It can actually create more dysregulation. Now, for many, that won't be a surprise, but I know it was for me. When I was meditating during times of intense adversity, I would feel, for example, I had it when my internet went down before the call happened. I was like, oh my gosh, the internet went down. And there was a real pounding in my chest and could feel just a whole wave that happened. When I was doing that meditation with you, if I was to focus my attention on my chest and that beating of my heart, that would actually ramp up my activation in that moment. So for me, what was helpful is to shift my attention to something else, in this case, a tree outside of the window. So there's a whole long talk I could do here about the reasons that over-attending to traumatic stress, places of adversity, can actually lock us into a very unhelpful loop. And inside of that, and this gets to self-regulation, there will be times for all of us where just being with will be the answer to pull on our mindfulness practice and just be with whatever that is, sensations, memories, images, whatever's there, is totally the move to make. So for me, again, as an example, if I was to pause this whole call right now and I was sitting and I still had somewhat of the racing heart from the internet going down, there would be times where actually just being with that feeling of anxiety would absolutely be the move for me. Because in being present with, in my deep capacity of building that capacity, just like I'm here for this, I'm here with this, that would actually increase my window. It would increase my capacity to be with stress, because it's not about trying to just get away from what's difficult and to be comfortable, as you all know. So there's times that we're wanting to be with, and then there's going to be times, and this is a lot of the work around trauma, and especially for those of you who are new to this community, there's also times where we want to be working differently with something. And that might be actively bringing in self-regulation practices. That might be as simple as I'm going to stand up, take a break, and take a walk. Or it might actually be pulling on the map that we have of different practices, of which you all have a bunch. I will be, trying to give you a couple today. Hopefully they're new. But ideally, there's moments where we go, okay, being with this level of stress is a lot. This is super activating. Let me actually pull in a tool, again, not to just be comfortable, but to actually increase my capacity to be with this stress. I'll give you one example on my block. So there's a family that's on my block. They have 3 kids. I know them well for a couple of years now. And their car is often parked just down past my window, which is, I work at this desk. And so I see them go by every day and we say hi. And one of the partners of the couple is a nurse right now working at the hospital. So I know they're under a lot of stress. And I saw them walk by and I just felt this wave of like, I felt nervous, I felt scared, I felt compassion. They have a lot of kids and I have my own compromised health. So I was like, should I go out? Should I talk to them? I just had a whole moment. And that felt like a choice moment where I could have just like sat back and go, let me just be with this whole range of feelings that are here. And then also what's here right now is it felt like there's also a move to make to go out and check in with them. So I opened my window. I didn't actually go down to play with the kids. And I opened my window and I checked in. I'm like, hey, how are you all doing? Do you need some groceries? I'm going down later this afternoon. And that felt more of an active kind of, I'm going to work with this right now. So this is a distinction as I move towards the self-regulation part of this meetup that I wanted to just kind of put on the table with all of you. That's a really important distinction, I'd say right now, for many of us, I know it is for me, of times where it's like, where do I need to be with what's happening and where do I need to work with stress? And again, we can go, there's a myriad of different moments, situations, examples where we could be talking about this duality of being with and working with. And to be clear up front, I'm not holding them as separate, that one is embedded in the other. And this distinction of working with and being with comes from Rick Hanson. Some of you will know Rick Hanson, a psychologist who does a lot of work around, again, both being with and working with. And he talks about it like, you many heard the 2 wings of, I feel like this 2 wings metaphor is used so much. So forgive me if you've heard the 2 wings metaphor all the time, but these 2 wings of a bird, like you can't fly without the 2 wings and one needs the other. So I'd hold this as 2 wings of trauma sensitive mindfulness, is both that capacity to be with, to work with, and then to know when one is called for. And that's, I'm sure we'll have other calls after this. That is the deep water to me. That's the place for us all to train, because there's no guidebook for that. Like that is something that we're learning in a very dynamic way over time of, okay, when do I be with, when do I work with? In terms of the 2 wings, sometimes I've heard of this around like mindfulness and compassion are also talked about the 2 wings. Tara Brach talks about that. My friend right now, we've been doing a little text thread about just like, hey, how's everyone doing? What's happening? And for those of you that know Friday Night Lights, it's a it's a it's embarrassing. It's like a football show that was on. But Friday Night Lights, for those of you that if you've seen it, it was actually like this pretty profoundly deep show. And there's um, a quote that the coach would say to the team, which is clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. And so a friend of mine was saying this has been her, what she's been repeating to herself with this moment around coronavirus is like full heart. I just lost it. Uh, eyes open. What did I say? Eyes open, wide. Can anyone jump in and remind me? I just clear eyes.
Clear
Thank you.
eyes, clear eyes.
Eyes, clear eyes. And which, if you think about it, is kind of like it is so much of the two wings. It's like clear eyes. I'm seeing clearly what's happening. Full hearts, like I'm here, I'm compassionate, I'm open, I'm doing my work, and can't lose. And for her, this has just been this mobilizing line, like, okay, clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose, be in. It doesn't mean being passive. It's like we meet the moment. So let me just say something briefly about the being with, working with distinction, and then we'll go into these three different. I'm going to offer three different self-regulation practices. So again, the being with. This is really mindfulness. Mindfulness is being with. This community here is often so versed. I know that a lot of you are doing work around the being with. This is sustained present moment awareness, that amazing ability to know what's happening when it's happening, which I don't know about all of you, but right now that is so important. I am getting caught up in waves of anxiety. And it's like, can I come back and notice, oh, I'm anxious right now? Okay, that's what's happening. So cultivating that capacity to be with our experience, which it's a game changer, and then working with is the number of practices. You will all have different practices that you do. We'll be bringing in more self-regulation practices here that you can work with. I think of this a lot around discernment. It's that ability of knowing in the moment, what do we need? And again, that's what I think that we're going to be needing here in both this moment and then, gosh, I don't know about all of you, but I've been so humbled the last, I feel like just 24 hours of getting a sense of the runway here and a longer trajectory. I was like, wow, okay, this could be a real shift. And so, how can we stay dynamic and discerning about what's needed in any given moment? Okay, so let me shift here to self regulation practices, and we'll do these together, and then we'll open up space here for you if you have questions. And again, I see there's some comments coming in. Honestly, a big part of this call is you have a chance to connect with each other. So just encourage you to be also using the chat here, making connections. And at the end of the call, I'll be opening up space for all of you to have more time for that. So practices for self-regulation, as I said earlier, it's like you notice that you're out of your window, you notice that you're feeling more dysregulated. That's in and of itself huge. And then what can we do in those moments? And how do we also support each other to also notice when we're dysregulated? I don't know about all of you, but I can go sometimes for like 10 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days or longer of being dysregulated and not notice until something just shows me like, wow, I'm actually quite dysregulated. For those of you that are, in some kind of partnership or family, or if you're quarantined, you're living with people. I know a couple right now that they have a game around dysregulation, that if one person is feeling highly dysregulated and the other person notices that they're highly dysregulated, they've been leaving a little like toy on the kitchen table just as a way to say like, you might want to do regulation practice as a way to not be so direct and say you're dysregulated. So we can all find like creative ways to be helping each other regulate. And I want to offer a couple here. So here, the three that I want to offer, one is a practice around this discernment of working with and being with and what do I need. The second is around the breath. It's something I just did recently on social media, so some of you have seen it. It's an oldie but a goodie. And then the third one is I want to do a practice with you all around safety and working with the body of what are the postures or what's the position that would help us feel most safe. So this will probably be for the next, I'm guessing like 12 minutes, maybe 15 at the most, and then I'll open it up here to dialogue with all of you. So for this first practice, I just want to invite you to find a posture, excuse me, that feels right for you for a short guided meditation. And just letting your attention, it could drop into the body if that feels too activating. You're welcome to place it back with your resource from earlier. And you just could be just noticing what's here right now. The chance to check in. That could be emotionally. That could be like, what's my mood right now? Having been here on this call, hearing some of the content. And then I know whatever is here for you, whether it's a mood or sensations or thought streams, just taking a moment to see if you can make space for that, like nothing to change. Okay, that's what's here right now. Let me just be with. And then the invitation for this first self-regulation practice is to get to ask yourself the question, what do you need right now? And in asking that question, a frame here is, do you need in this moment to be more in the bucket of being with, or does it feel like what would best support you right now would be something along the lines of working with? And again, in that distinction, we need both. So one doesn't exclude the other. But if we were doing a 5 to 10 minute practice from here, which we won't be, but if you had the option of really just a bare mindful awareness practice, like, okay, I'm going to be practicing being with my current moment experience, would that be most supportive? And if so, what tells you that? Like maybe there's a settling in the stomach, or you have an emotion comes that says, okay, that would actually feel best, or maybe an image comes. But I just invite you to notice, like, what is it that tells you, what's the information that lets you know that being with would be the most supportive practice? Or it may also be working with. By working with, I mean a more purposeful or a different kind of practice that would involve something like shifting your posture, or that could be even like a loving kindness practice, or it may be taking a walk outside, or maybe you need to journal or have a conversation with someone. So you may also be in that domain. And again, I also invite you here just to notice, was there any information that told you that that is what would be most supportive right now of your regulation? So for some, it'd be like, I need to have some time with my cat or my dog. Great, awesome. Just notice what told you that. Anytime we can track that, that's supporting our discernment. Okay, I'm going to be shifting here out of this practice, but if there's any useful information that came with that, I invite you to just note that, write that down. Again, the more that we're refining our discernment of what's needed, being with, working with, that can support us on the daily right now in our work, in our lives. Okay, so I'll invite you to just really let that one go, and then we'll be shifting to a second self-regulation practice. If any of these feel too rapid, like you need more time with any, you're welcome to do that. We'll be sending out the recording if you want that. So a second self-regulation practice is really key around work with trauma and this is working with the breath. And we might do another meetup around this, but the breath is it can be a double-edged sword, as some of you will know, around working with high activation and stress. The respiratory system, intimately connected to our sympathetic nervous system, which is totally tied into fight flight, and a high level of activation, again, in a moment like this around coronavirus. If we pay attention to the breath, that can sometimes also increase our activation in unhelpful ways. So there's the caveat here with the breath that working with the breath can sometimes be unhelpful. And I think it's a really helpful toolkit to have. We want to have different practices around the breath. So I want to offer one. Some of you will have seen this. You might have seen this on social media. You might have done this with me before. But it involves working with the breath, but also working with our hands. It could also be our feet. I'm going to show you with our hands, but you're welcome to use other parts of the body. And basically what we're going to be doing is connecting our breath with the modulation of different movements. And so in this case, it's going to be the hands. So what I'm going to invite you to do is have your hands up. You don't need to have them in the frame. You can also have them, you can have them down in your lap like this. I'm just going to hold them up so you can see. And with your hands, this practice is especially useful if you're more hyper aroused or hypervigilant. The breath is shallow. Your hands are going to mimic the actual depth of your breath and the expansion and contraction of your lungs. So, for example, it would be like inhaling, the hands expand, exhaling, the hands contract somewhat. You could also do this on your lap with your hands, like an inhale, a gentle exhale. You could do this with your feet. But I invite you to just try that for a moment of go ahead and move the hands with the breath as the breath is right now. So just take 20 or 30 seconds here. So just notice the pace of your breath and then expanding and contracting the hands in a way that matches the expansion and contraction of the lungs right now. Again, it doesn't have to be, I'm doing it small. You can also do it bigger if that feels good. Finding what works for you here. And then after you've done that for a moment, an invitation is to actually toggle the hands at the pace that it would feel best for your breath to go. So I know for me, sometimes I'm shallow breathing in a rapid way. And what I'll do is I'll actually expand and contract the hands in a way that's actually a little bit longer, a little bit slower, just inviting a little bit more depth into the breath. For me, a little bit more like a slower pace. And just, again, this is an experiment. You can see if this works for you. If it doesn't work for you, you can let it go. And then the last part of this practice is, the invitation, if this is working for you, is to toggle your attention between the hands and the breath. So you're not just over focusing on one. It's like letting there be movement and pace between both. If one or any aspect of this feels especially regulating, then you can focus in on that. So if actually noticing the hands feels great, then do that. If this doesn't feel helpful, great, just let that go. Okay, and then in the next few breaths, I'm going to invite you to let that go. Okay, so that's number 2, and I would like to do one more. I also really appreciate, there's people like Brent and Christy who have been doing trauma-sensitive mindfulness work. I just appreciate the chat thread that's happening right now. We're all in this together. Yeah, thumbs up, totally, Julie. It's sweet. It's like, I'm going to try to find my way to like offer what I know, but I'm not holding this like I know what to do. I am in it with you all, and I have some thoughts. So there's one last one that I'd like to do with you all, one last practice. And that's around actually, it's around safety, or what I'll call safety. It could also be comfort, like what has you feel best, but it has to do with our positionality and our embodiment in our surrounding environment. And I want to acknowledge that everyone will have different bodies, different access. Some of you might be in a wheelchair, you can't move. It's just, we can all modify this practice in any way that works for you, for your body. And what I'm going to be inviting you to do is to actually position yourself in your surrounding environment in a way that would have you feel most stable and safe for the next couple minutes. And so let's try this. This will be about a 4-minute practice, maybe 5, is to just take a moment, again, dropping your attention into the present, could be into the body if that feels regulating. And I invite you to ask this question of like, where could I physically place myself in my surrounding environment based on what's possible that would have me feel most regulated, safe, and stable? And just see if anything comes. It may be that sitting in front of the computer is exactly where you want to be and what will have you feel most safe. I know for me, actually having something against my back is quite helpful, just to feel something. Like right now, I'm in a backless chair and I have this kind of room behind me. So if anything came, I'm going to invite you, if you can, you're welcome. You can leave the computer where it is. If you want to take us with you, you can. I invite you to actually go and place yourself in that spot. It could be also a posture, like if you want to be in child's pose, if you want to curl up, if you want to stand up, if you want to stand with your back against a wall. I'm going to move myself over to my couch. So I think I can take you with me. Yeah. So this is just, again, this is just an invitation. If this works for you, great. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. But it's cold. So go ahead and make that shift if that's something you want to try. Again, it could be standing, it could be seated. And then if you are trying this experiment, once you're in that physical posture, I just invite you to drop your attention down into noticing, did that increase a sense of safety, stability, regulation? Just noticing, no judgment, ideally. If it did, great. If it didn't, no problem. You're also welcome to keep experimenting. I notice when I sit and I can feel my back against the chair, something does settle and it feels helpful. So if you noticed that there's any kind of internal shift, what my invitation is to just mindfully note that. So if, for example, there was a change in your breath, or there was a different emotion that came, just mindfully note that. It's like letting yourself have the experience of whatever's here for you. If that's more regulation, great. What's important here is that we're not just creating a state change, but that we're actually, if we are creating the state change, then giving ourselves a moment to actually take that in and absorb it, like letting our nervous system register the shift. And again, just for another moment here, noticing if there's a quality of regulation, letting that in more deeply if possible. And then just being curious, just an experiment to see what can help you feel most regulated in terms of your posture. Okay. And then in the next few breaths, I'm going to invite you to let that go. You're welcome to stay there, of course. Or you can come back to this at any point in your day. Okay. So those are three practices I wanted to offer today. If others, I'm sure there's just so many others, you're welcome to chat that in. You're welcome to stay on the call after the top of the hour if you want to be sharing and kind of networking more around practices that are working for you. And at this point, I just really want to open it up to any of you here. This could be questions that you have about any of the three practices. I'll do my best to answer. And this could also be if there are stories that you've experienced, like your own experience, or I don't want to get into too much. I want to leave room for your own personal experience of how it's all going at the top of the hour. But if there's stories that you feel like would benefit the community here, please, share them. This is, again, a chance for us to come together. So that's the mix I was thinking. Questions that you have, or any particular experiences that you want to share right now. And if you're, oh, thanks, Julie. Rain, yes, for sure. So important. And if you want to come on, if you could just, you're welcome to unmute yourself. That's probably the best way.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please. Is it my?
Yes, I'm sitting in Kuwait, and thank you for your book, because I'm
Mm.
teaching alone here. I'm from Denmark, and I'm teaching MBSR, and your book has changed the whole ball game for me.
Wow.
I had so many people, I believe, with trauma. And I just want to share experience from today, and because I was thinking in the moment, what would David say, and what would he do? Just have to breathe. I'm teaching online now because we are in curfew, like all of you, I guess we are. And I'm teaching class 6 in MBSR, where we have a very long sit, the choiceless awareness, which is very spacious and very fluid. And I keep saying, all your anchors, please come back to your knees, your feet, or whatever. And when people were invited to go into the communication exercise with the mindful listening, where we, practice listening to one another, one lady just said, I can't do it right now. I can't. And I was like, fine, we'll just, you and I be together. And then we spoke a little bit, and then she said, I couldn't feel my body. I couldn't feel my body, but it was fine. It was fine. I couldn't feel my body. So I couldn't join this listening exercise because I had to walk back and forth. I couldn't feel my body. And that's why when I thought, oh my God, what would David say or do? But she kept saying it was fine. It was very beautiful experience, like God and, pigeon flying, but I couldn't feel my body. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, I wanted to honor that she said she was fine, but on the other hand, I want to honor what you're bringing into this. Is this, because I have a sense that this might not be healthy. So I just would like to appreciate to hear.
I'd love to, yeah, thanks I have one question. When you say that you have the sense it might not be helpful or healthy, can you just say any more about what gives you that sense for the person that you're working with?
Because she told me I cannot feel my body. I'm not here. She said I can feel something inside and it's coming out. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to make her explain what's going on. But she said, I cannot feel myself. I cannot, and this is one of the pillars, what I have been taught in mindfulness, to feel the body, to have some kind of, so yeah. That's why I'm like, oh, how would you respond? I could feel it ruminating.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Well, and you said you're in Kuwait, is that right? Yeah. Well, thanks for the question. Thanks for your work. And I'll tell you a couple of my thoughts that come up. I have two different thoughts. One is, if you're doing this in any kind of ongoing way, then to just, I think, staying in the question, like basically I appreciate your care for this person. Like obviously you want to do well by them. So actually staying curious with them and noticing, okay, if they come back onto the online group with you, noticing how were they next time? And if it seems like they're actually more dysregulated in an ongoing way, I think it's worth having a conversation with them about what practices they might need, et cetera, et cetera. And that's, I'd say 30%. 70%, though, even more, would be really respecting and affirming the intelligence of that. Like a deep understanding of, almost like an of course, that someone can't feel their body. And in some ways she's reassuring you that it's okay for her. And that in a moment of intense adversity like this, I know we're all going to be experiencing stress in different ways right now, in adversity and trauma, that actually to leave the body or to pull away from the body, there's just deep intelligence inside of that. And that there's nothing to argue with or to try to actually, which happened to me once, maybe 10 years ago, where someone was trying to kind of get me back into my body and said, we need to get you back in my body. And it just felt terrible. And what was amazing was when I told someone, I said, I feel like I can't feel my body, I'm going away. And what they said is, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Of course, under this much stress you would. And what they said to me is, they said, do you know how you're leaving your body? And that was very helpful for me, because it helped me get curious about, well, how was I leaving? And I realized, oh, I'm actually like leaving through thinking a lot or different ways. So that willingness to both be accepting, normalizing, and then curious about the experience, and just regulating, like, okay, of course that's happening. And I think what you said to the first part is staying in connection with them, and not just checking out, but actually might be, tethering back with an email, seeing how they're doing. So I think there's a delicate balance that you're marking here, of having some concern and curiosity, but not making them feel ashamed or like, oh, I've done something wrong. So that's my first couple of thoughts on it. How's that land for you?
It's beautiful. And this wrong feeling, that's the biggest takeaway I have from your teaching. This, whatever you feel, it's so beautiful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks
I'll
for
keep
asking.
it close.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. This is for those that are newer to this community. I feel like this is a common theme about how do we both deeply honor people's experience, and then also not coddle, like still to provide a structure and containment. Like it's not just anything goes. It's that if someone was significantly dissociating in practice, there may be a point to actually say, hey, let's have a conversation. So we need to have the guardrails, and then just what you're saying about like a deep respect for people. So thank you, and thanks for your work. Yeah, I see. What's your name?
This is Lucia.
Hi, Lucia.
Yeah, this is a phonetic spelling of my name, what you see on the screen.
Phonetic, smart. It's great.
I'm originally from former Czechoslovakia, and my own situation is that right now I'm in the US, but I was in a refugee camp when I was 19, and I was a political refugee for some time. I was a stateless person for many, many years. So I've been through some adversity. And so for me, it seems like, okay, this is just another test, right now. But I was curious about your, the connecting breath with movement. I don't know if you can maybe explain it, if you can point me to your, social media post. This is something that I wasn't really, I don't know, it just kind of eluded me.
Yeah.
What the purpose of this is and how it's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happy to. I think the post was on Instagram. It feels so cheesy. Okay. Anyway, that's where it is. That's where it's living. But the purpose behind it. Thanks for the question. So part of my trauma training comes from somatic experiencing, which some of you will know on this call. Peter Levine, founder of this, it's a psychotherapeutic approach to trauma healing, I'm a clinician in training. One of the, it's a combination of two things. One is that part of my work is around not over attending to places of basically of traumatic stimuli, so that there may be times where we're feeling sensations that are too activating for us to be regulated. And then inside of somatic experiencing, there's a concept called pendulation, which means toggling our attention often between places of more activation or stress and places of more resource. And that in the experience of Levine and others in the somatic experiencing community, that pendulation and shift between places of resource and places of difficulty or adversity, as you were saying, you know this well, that can actually really support the nervous system to be processing through overwhelming experience. There's also, of course, a number of other principles in somatic experiencing. One is called titration, meaning we just go little bits at a time. But that idea of pendulation is what I'm trying to bring in here with the hands. So we're not just hyper-focusing on the breath, we're actually providing two different landing points for our attention between the hands and the breath. And then we have this possibility of bringing our attention back and forth between that movement of the hands and the breath, so to provide us with a little bit of resource. It doesn't work for everyone, of course. And for some people, that feeling of like, oh, I have a little bit of agency with the pace of my breath and the depth can feel really helpful to increase a sense of agency and choice. So that's kind of the second layer. Does that help about the why of the hands?
Yeah, so you're not necessarily trying to synchronize the movement with the breath. You're kind of shifting your attention from one to the other.
Yeah, the two parts of it are that first part. There is some synchronicity in some ways because it's acknowledging the depth and the pace of the breath as it is at first. So there is a synchronization at first.
Okay.
And then that second part is where we say, okay, if it would feel good, quote unquote, good to actually even deepen the breath here or go a little bit slower, then actually that's when you can shift the breath. And some people have the experience that the changing of the hands actually has this impact on the respiratory system in a deeper way.
Got it.
It's something to play with and experiment with. This comes from, I asked a woman named Tim Goddard in Australia. She had been doing MBSR for 20 years, mindfulness-based stress reduction. And she had a version of this, and she said that was my go-to for people that were feeling really activated. So yeah, that's a little bit more on that.
Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying.
Thank you. And just one more thing, and then Julie will come to you. I really appreciate when you said about your own experience in earlier in your life or in refugee camps, that it's just a reminder for me of the ways that this particular moment will be activating for us in so many different ways. Like our histories are just going to come right to the foreground here. So I'm just thank you for naming that with us here.
Thank you. Thank you for the program. I'm really very grateful for this.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you. Glad you're here. Julie, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I just want to do maybe in 60 seconds or 90 seconds rain, because some people in the thread weren't familiar with it.
Hey, great. Could you? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, so it was created a few decades ago by Wendy McDonald, and it's been beautifully taught by Tara Brach for decades, and myself and many, many other people. So yesterday we were driving up to a takeout food place, and I was sitting in the passenger seat in my sister's car, and I felt my heart start racing, and I literally felt my body sort of lifting up out of the chair. And so I recognized I was having anxiety. That's the R. I placed my hands on my heart, that soothing touch, to release oxytocin and endorphins and try to downregulate the fight, flight, freeze, cortisol and adrenaline from the anxiety. I allowed it to be there so that I could see what the hell was going on. I investigated why it was there. Hello, I'm a germaphobe anyway. We're in a pandemic. There's going to be other humans there, right? And then my sister's going to come back in the car, and is is there going to be Clorox wiped everything in the environment, right? So I investigated it. And then this is the important piece of RAIN. It's N. It used to be not identify, don't run away with the storyline. Now it's more nourish because of the mindful self-compassion movement. I'm happy to say, as a mindful self-compassion teacher, what do I need to hear right now? What do I need to do right now? Which is your wise discernment piece. And the Rick Hansen being with, working with piece. And for me, I know in my body, and I've worked with Christy Arbon, I've been really fortunate. For me, I know in my body, I need to do something yang to calm down, not just calm down. So I talked to myself, I called myself sweetheart. I completely chilled myself out by thinking things. And then I knew when we got home, I was going to go in the room and I was going to lay down and I was going to do guided meditations. That's what I did. That's a complete RAIN for me, taking care of myself.
It's awesome, Julie. Thank you for running through. I hadn't seen that come up in the chat thread, so thank you. And yeah, that's absolutely, I mean, that kind of brings us full circle of the importance of that question in the moment. Like the pause, I love how Tara talks about the sacred pause of what do we need, and then really like what's needed here. And the fact, I don't know about all of you, I just had the chance to scroll through the number just to see so many of you here, and the ways that things are just changing so quickly, and how dynamic this is, what's needed in a given moment. So thanks, Julie, for bringing back to the pause. If you want, if this is helpful, the being with, working with, what do you need, and then keep building our tools around self-regulation. So we're at the top of the hour, and I want to respect the time here. So I'm going to be pivoting here in a moment, but there's going to be a second part to this call. So if you if you don't have anywhere to go, you're welcome to hang out here with us. But I'm shifting formally here. So if you're leaving here, and if this is the end for you of this call, thank you. Thanks for being here. Actually, let me just say one thing, if anyone's leaving, about ways to connect. So we will be in our team's meeting, we're figuring out if we're going to be keeping offering. We've been doing this once a month. We might find ways to try to make these more often right now. If you have suggestions for us, you're welcome to put them into the chat box. Please also, if you have requests of each other, you can put them into the chat box here. We're going to be doing free resources for people, just putting stuff out to the community, inviting you all to share as well. We also, in a couple weeks, we're going to be doing a course that we've had in the book. It's just the timing of this is kind of wild. So there's a course in a couple weeks. You can learn more about it on my website if you're interested. We're currently figuring out ways to scholarship. Like with every person that comes and registers, we're going to be creating an open, free scholarship right now to make sure that people can access the program. So if that's of interest, please go. You can check out the website. And again, we'll be in touch with resources that we're going to be offering. And if you want to take a deeper dive into the regulation pieces, that's what we're going to be doing inside the course. So here's my thought about where to go from here. We have the capacity of doing breakout rooms with each other. And breakout rooms on Zoom just give us the chance to be, this will be optional, of course, but if you'd like to stick around, I'd like to give you the chance to connect with a smaller group of people to really just get to let folks know just how are you doing right now? Where are you at? What's up for you? And I'm going to, so Tyler's here, he's going to be helping us. I know there's some people getting off the call, which is great. Thanks again for being here.